Alright guys, so as discussed, we're firstly going to start off with the time and sales, and essentially all that is it's just showing you the transactions with a timestamp, and that's why it's called the time and the sale, basically the sale of the transaction. Now I'm just going to flick through a few slides back and forward here very quickly, just going to spend literally 30 seconds on this slide, because I just want to reiterate what I said in the previous slide, which is that the aggression is on the time and sales and on pretty much everything else, whereas the supply or the intention is shown only on the depth of market. So whilst we're going to start with the time and sales, we're actually going to focus a lot of time on the depth of market. Time and sales, I've only just put it in before. I was a bit undecided whether to start with the depth of market, come back to time and sales, but in theory the time and sales is the most purest form of data coming from the exchange, so I thought it's a good place to start, and then we can quickly move on to the depth of market. But essentially, just to reiterate, the difference between the aggression and the intention is, if you think about the best example is the ones we gave before. So with the, say, hairdressers, you can almost think of the supply, the availability of hairdressers willing to cut your hair. Or it could be a good. It could be later on, as you'll see in the slides, we're going to use the fruit and vegetable market. So it could be the availability or supply of an actual good, box of bananas, for example. So that's the intention, right? That we're not going to actually see that on the time and sales, but what we will see is the other side of that. So if you think about it, that's supply, but the price is going to be set where demand meets that supply. So if there's actual people coming and aggressively buying and selling, you're going to see that on the time and sales. So again, people actually physically making the decision to pay for a haircut, or to pay for a box of bananas, or to pay for a good, or to buy pound dollar, etc., etc. Now, it may seem a bit ridiculous that I'm using all these real life examples, but what you got to understand is, and I keep saying them because I don't hear anyone else saying it, is that there is no difference. So what we're going to do is we're just quickly going to flick forward so I can just show you that visibly, so you don't get too confused. So that's the intention, as I said, the bids and offers. So if you think about it, let's imagine there were 7 boxes of bananas available to sell, or there were 27 people willing to buy from you if you wanted to sell to them. They're not actually doing any buying or selling, guys. They're just sitting there. And we're going to go through this in depth with a real life example. So if you don't get it right now, don't worry. All you got to know is that's supply, and that's supply as well. And then this is the actual aggression, this column here. So you can see here 2 people lifted, 2 people bought, 8 people sold here at this price. So this is what the time and sales is showing us, the buying and selling actually going on, and then the price. So like I said, guys, if you don't get this immediately, don't worry too much. We're going to go over it again and again and again. And don't forget, if you're in a professional trading environment, they're going to spend a significant amount of time showing you this again and again and again until you understand it, because I know it's not easy to get it whilst you're watching this, me just waffle on. Is actually what I'm trying to do is just set the scene a little bit, and then in time when you go and do this yourself, and I'm going to show you how to do it, and you watch it, I promise you it's going to become like second nature, like the back of your hand. So it was important I showed you that depth of market, just so you know exactly what these columns are. So what's actually happening is, we called it the time and sale. So if it's pound dollar, now you got to remember, guys, this is the futures market, okay? So there's an exchange in between. Go back to module 1 if you need to refresh yourself about what the futures market is and how it actually differs ever so, well, slightly to the foreign exchange spot market. Obviously in the spot market you've got a similar function, but there's no exchange in between. It's all done over the counter, essentially 90% of it. So if, go back and revisit that, but for now what we're doing is we're using the futures market as a proxy for the spot market, because that's the best proxy available in the world, and it's what professional firms are doing. So that's why we use this. So I want to say that as a caveat. but I won't worry about that too much at this stage. Just understand what is driving the price of a financial instrument and where you can see the supply and demand. So we called it the time and sales. There's the time element of the time and sales, timestamp. What time? 8:27 in the morning and the date. And then the next thing you'll see is the price. So this is each one of these is a transaction taking place, and in a moment I'm going to show you a real time and sales moving as the market is live. And the next thing you'll see is the volume. The volume is the aggression, guys. The aggression we talked about, those middle two columns. I'm going to show you that in a moment as well. And then it's the type. So was it a purchase or was it a sale? So here you can see an ask, there you can see a bid. Okay, so let's just look at one transaction on this slide before I bring in a live market example for you. So what do you see here at 8:20? Forget about all this stuff below it. Let's just forget about all that. Let's imagine it was just one you saw here. On the 25th of February at 8:27 in the morning, someone decided to come in, and what did they do? They bought, right? At 129.75. How much did they buy? Okay, they bought one contract. So what they've essentially done, if you think about it in terms of your retail platform, you see here market execution, that's aggression. There's another one called pending order, that's intention. So we're looking at just aggression here, you physically hitting the buy button. Would you agree when you use the pending order, you're waiting for someone to come to you? You're essentially the supply part of the equation. Here you're the demand. You're demanding it immediately, essentially. It's aggressive demand. So it's almost like you hitting buy. You click buy at the ask, and it's actually pound dollar. And when you hit buy, it comes up. So people in a professional environment will be able to see that. Now, obviously, they're not going to be necessarily interested in single contracts, but there'll be significant. I mean, here it was a quiet time in the market, so there were just 2, 3, 4 contracts being bought. But sometimes you'll see major aggression, and actually, without getting too complicated at this stage, it's to do with the way the algorithm works at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, who's responsible for currencies. Now, obviously, there's many different exchanges in the world, but what they're doing is they don't actually show you block orders. So even if this was one person, they'll split it out against people sitting on the bid and offer. That's all I'm going to say at this stage, because I'm going to end up confusing people because it's so early on. We can come back and revisit that time and time again as the course goes on, but essentially they're not blocking those up. And there are firms and companies out there, and I can also develop that on my platform where I can create an algorithm to bring those orders together. But for now, all you got to worry about is that on your retail platform, as we talked about, you're only seeing information 1 and information 2. This is information 3 and 4. So we haven't got on to 5 and 6. In fact, I labeled this, I believe I labeled it 5 and 6. Do apologize. But essentially, it's 2 pieces of extra information that you aren't seeing on your retail platform. Okay, so it's this aggression. So now let's go on and see a live example, and hopefully that will make more sense to you.